Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us tonight. I know you had other things you could do, watch TV, be lazy, but you're here to learn. So we're very thankful that you're here. I'm going to teach you a lot of tips and tricks, how to overcome issues you have had in the past with growing seeds. Um, and we will send you a vegetable planting calendar. So I'll go through step by step how to do this. It's not just putting a seed on in the soil and growing it like we did back in kindergarten. As some of you know in your experience in gardening, you come across issues, fungal disorders. Um, your soil was too dry or maybe too wet. You had an anaerobic environment. Maybe you think your seeds are expired or too old. Yeah, just because the seeds were sold that year doesn't mean they're expired. So I'll teach you how to test those seeds for seed viability. So we're going to go through a lot of different things. So just hang on. I promise you this will be interesting, entertaining, and you'll take a lot from it. First, let's listen to this. It's a 1.5 minute information video. So stay tuned. It's really quick. This presentation is supported by our regional water supplier, Tarrant Regional Water District. TRWD maintains 4 area lakes and pipelines needed to provide surface water to local water treatment plants so they can clean it to meet drinking water standards for our communities. They also work with many cities in Tarrant County, such as Fort Worth, Arlington, and Mansfield, to provide water conservation programs for the community. Conservation is an important water supply strategy to help meet the needs of a growing population. There are currently 2.3 million people in Tarrant County, and this is expected to double over the next 50 years. This is why TRWD supports many programs that help save water through outdoor watering and gardening education. At SaveTarrantWater.com, you can sign up for free weekly watering advice custom to your location. If you are a resident of Tarrant County, you can sign up for a free sprinkler system checkup where a licensed irrigator comes to your home and provides a comprehensive evaluation of your system with recommendations to reduce water waste. There is also an event calendar where you can find important information about future classes and workshops. TRWD also partners with organizations like Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service and the Tarrant County Master Gardeners to provide educational programs just like this one. Be sure to check out SaveTarrantWater.com and sign up for their free services. Okay, that was pretty painless, right? I do highly recommend that you guys sign up for that. I had a licensed irrigation company come to my house and they spent a good hour evaluating my sprinkler system and taught me so many things about how I could save water here, how this corner wasn't watering efficiently. So it's free. You have nothing to lose except gain a lower water bill. So I highly recommend it. Let's get into seeds now, what you guys are here for. And I realize a lot of you guys, you're here, not to be a veggie gardener. Some of you realize, hey, vegetables are cheap enough. I'll just go buy them at the supermarket. Or some of you just want pretty flowers. Well, you can start either one with seeds and save a ton of money that way. And, growing your own vegetables is so rewarding. You can grow them organically. And there's nothing like going outside and rubbing your fingers on those tomato leaves and just kind of sniffing it, or rosemary, anything that's real fragrant. It just, I don't know, just does something for your soul. But a lot of you, I've heard in my public teachings, some people will come up to me and I'll ask them, are you a big gardener? What have you done? What's your level of gardening? And some of them will say, I hate gardening. I'm only here because I need some tips and tricks to make it easier on me because I keep failing. And, of course, that's like a dagger to my soul. How can anybody hate gardening? It should be rewarding. But yes, it's true. If you're not good at it, you want to give up. Who wants to fail at something? So I am here to help you overcome those challenges and be successful at doing this. But I will say, in starting from seeds, it does take some care. I tell people it's like having a little pet. You have to water it, feed it, nurture it, take care of it, give it some sunlight. You can't just plant it and forget it. So Let's go through all of those steps. First, why do we want to start plants from seeds? Well, as you know, if you go to any of those big box stores or mom and pop or anywhere, catalogs, you can find way more variety in the seed packets than you can in the actual pots, the potted plants. So that's one big reason. Save money. You can share and swap. I love gardening club groups, church groups, master gardeners, anywhere I go, and you'll see seed swaps or free seeds. You don't need 100 tomato plants or 100 pepper plants, or maybe you do. I don't know. It just depends on what you're doing. But usually, you know, I like to just split a packet with my mom or my mother-in-law, and you know, we save money that way too. But try a seed swap. It's a lot of fun. Get your friends together. You can get a jump start for spring. Believe it or not, I know it seems really cold outside right now, but this is the time to get started. Experiment and learn more about plants. You know, you start to see the seed will germinate. It'll pop out of the soil. You kind of look at it and, oh, okay, I did this and this is what happened. Or, oh, it's growing faster now after I did this to it. Or maybe after fertilizing, you notice that your plants are like, hey, thank you. I'm really going to flourish for you. So you really learn as you experiment and start growing plants. Again, better plant selection. Where do you put your planted seeds? You know, a lot of people go wrong at this step. They think they can just use a bathroom window or their kitchen window, thinking, well, there's a window there. Well, that's not true. You really need a south-facing window. But then there's another catch. If you have homes that are really close together or a tree blocking that window and it's south, that's still not going to be enough, okay? Think about a greenhouse. A greenhouse is either plastic or glass usually, and that plant is sitting there and it's getting almost all day sun, right? From coast to coast, it's getting all of that sun. But if your plant is in a window, it's only getting a few hours of sun if it reaches through that window. So the sunniest window in your house is usually south facing. So take a look around and see which one is best. Even if you have a south window, to be honest with you, the best lush, thick, healthy growth is going to come from grow lights. And surprisingly, 12 to 14 hours per day. If you look at this picture on the right, you know, there are so many different types of grow lights, but this one right here, it's just an advertisement, but they actually should be a little closer. Some people might think, oh, it's going to burn my plant. No, it's a grow light for plants, so it won't. Just follow the manufacturer's instructions. They're all different. Let's see here. This one's right here in a window, and this one is actually a setup where they have the long fluorescents or even LEDs right above the plants. If you like low maintenance like me, put a timer on it. I've done both. I started out just, you know, in the morning, turning it on, turning it off in the evening. Too much work, you forget about it, life gets crazy. So get an automatic timer and just let it take care of itself. But do check on your plants. So on the left here, this is leggy growth. This is not desirable at all. We want this. This is what's desirable for us gardeners to be successful. We want that lush, healthy, thick growth, big leaves, everything about it. You know, that just makes me so happy to look at that picture. On the left here, those plants did not get enough sunlight. Okay, so maybe they were in a shadier window. Maybe they weren't provided grow lights. You don't have to have grow lights, but let me just say, if you don't use grow lights, don't start your seeds too soon. We'll talk about that too, the proper time to start your seeds. We'll go into that later. But when you have a plant like this, it's going to be weak. Okay, the stem's going to be weak. It's going to be more prone to breaking when the wind gust comes through. So this is a no, this is a yes. It has to have good light. Planting your seeds. You don't have to start with the more premium or expensive labeled seed starting mix, but if you continuously have issues, we'll talk about this too, fungal issues, sometimes you can't see it. You know, sometimes you see that white furry stuff growing and you're thinking, oh no, I know what's going to happen next. Everything's going to die. I'll talk about how to prevent that issue too. But if you continuously have that issue year after year, you may want to invest in seed starting soil. It is optional. I use it occasionally, not all the time, but that will help you definitely. Plant seeds at the right depth. Usually, the bigger the seed, the deeper it can go, usually. You don't want to plant seeds that are like black pepper, tiny consistency. You don't want to plant those 5 inches deep because that poor little seedling, it can never ever push through all that soil and make it to the sunlight. It won't happen. So always either look at the package instructions on how deep to plant them, and it can vary from an inch, 2 inches, to just scatter some light airy soil on top. It could be something as small as that, where it doesn't want to be down in the ground. You know, some seeds need sunlight to germinate, some don't. So make sure you do your research. If you don't have a seed packet because you collected the seed yourself, simple Google search, usually you can find that information. Here's another thing. You have to keep the soil moist but not soggy. What happens when you walk across a muddy mud puddle? If it's been wet for a while, it's going to get stagnant and stinky. Okay, that's an anaerobic environment. When that happens, your soil ends up getting fungal issues, bacteria, and then your poor little seedlings can't make it. They end up dying. So we have to kind of gauge. You want your soil to be like a wrung out sponge, okay, about that consistency, not dripping and not too dry. Here are some examples. I'm not promoting any of these brands, just kind of showing you what the packages look like. It just says seed starting mix. That's all it is. And basically what's inside, these are sterilized. So you don't have to fight, you know, the additional issue of fungal and bacterial issues, if that's your issue. You can also just use soil out of, you know, gardening soil and such like that. Make sure you don't use soil that is an amendment that you're supposed to add into native soil in the ground. That's something different. That's an amendment like compost. You don't want to plant directly in that. So always read package instructions. All right, this one is optional also, but if you have a heating mat, your plants are going to be so thankful. They're going to grow like they're on steroids, okay? They're going to germinate faster, which means they come out of their shell faster. You're going to see faster plant growth, lush growth. But I will say they can be dangerous. I recently found out that these should be changed out every 2 to 5 years, depending on how often it's used and the brand. So make sure you consult with the manufacturer on that. And, you know, I wouldn't keep one of these on and go on vacation. Okay, kind of keep an eye on it. But if you go to commercial growers facilities, you will see they are using grow mats because they're trying to expedite and get those, you know, plants out quicker. If your plant is sitting in a cold environment, the seeds will not wake up. They don't think it's spring yet. They think, well, we're still going to stay dormant because it's winter. Also, think about this. Have you ever touched your window in the winter? It's pretty chilly. Okay, so your windowsill, if that's where you're keeping your seeds, it's going to be a little colder right by the window versus where your bed is. Okay, so also think about that. So I don't always use a grow mat, a heating mat, I'm sorry, but if you're wanting to be more professional about it, have great results, the heating mat is definitely a good thing to have. When to start seeds indoors. People will argue about this. You know, they'll say, oh, it's March 13 or March 18. Who really cares about that, right? It's just the middle of March. Remember that M for March, middle of March. It's the easiest way to remember it. That's our last average frost date. I'm not saying that's the last chance for a freeze, okay? Because we can have a freeze even in April, it's happened. That's just our last average frost date. So when you read about seeds and when to plant them, back of package, the seed packets, it'll say, plant 6 weeks before your last average frost. Okay. We'll look at some seed packets to look at that in detail. So generally plant seeds indoors about 6 to 8 weeks before the last average frost date. So that is now. We need to get busy on this for spring. Can you guys believe it? I mean, it just seems like, Christmas was just here and time is just flying by. When to start seeds outdoors. And, some plants do better directly sown outdoors. We'll talk about some of those. So spring through late fall. Okay, you can even plant some seeds in the winter. A lot of Asian greens and things like that you can plant during the cold weather. A lot of herbs you can. This is a website that I highly recommend. This is my second favorite website. My favorite one, of course, is the AgriLife website, Texas A&M, because you're going to get specific information for our area, which plants do best here. And we'll talk about that later too, which vegetable plants, which seeds you should be purchasing and planting here, because our environment here is so different. We have the drought, we have the heat, we have these weird weather conditions here. But what's great is that we have 2 vegetable gardening seasons here in North Texas. We have the spring and the fall veggie garden. So we're kind of lucky. If you're a gardener, that's a great thing to be living here in North Texas. But almanac.com, I reference this website a lot. It's free. Just go to almanac.com. I highlighted it up here for you. And it gets real specific. So this is just a screenshot I did for Arlington, kind of centrally located. And it says your last spring frost is March 16th. Remember, I told you it could be March 13, 18, yada, yada, around there. Just remember middle of March. So close enough. So March 16 is this zip code's last frost date. So according to this zip code, okay, this may not match yours exactly. So, don't leave me now, but after we're done, visit almanac.com, then go to gardening, then go to planting calendar, and then they'll ask for your zip code. Well, look at this. It starts from A, it goes all the way to Z, but this is just a little snapshot of the beginning. Start seeds indoors, it says right here in this column. And here are the dates. Plant seedlings or transplants. Now, those are going to be your little, baby plants that you've grown. They're in a pot. That's when you can plant seedlings or transplants of arugula, okay? Start seeds outdoors, okay? That's a totally different animal. This is when you can plant them outdoors. And then here's your last date to plant, okay? Now that is again, we've got our spring and fall veggie gardening season, and this only pertains to arugula. Then we go to asparagus. It says NA, NA. It does not recommend planting this way in the spring, but you can start seeds outdoors during this time and your last day to plant right here. So you get the idea, just on and on. I have not ever followed the moon dates. They're pretty similar to the frost dates. Some people swear by the moon dates. I've just never done it. I just go by the frost date. So that's up to you, which approach you'd like to take. Let's look at the back of these seed packets here. All right, this one here, they tell you, sow in rich, fertile soil after danger of frost. Sow 1 to 2 seeds about 36 inches apart and cover with 1 inch of fine soil. Okay, we've got to listen to those instructions. Not a ½ inch, not 2 inches, but 1 inch. Firm lightly and keep evenly moist. Seedlings will emerge in 10 to 14 days. That's really important to pay attention to because some seeds will germinate and you'll see them in 3 days, 1 week. But this is going to it's going to push 2 weeks before you actually see them come out of the earth. So what's really important is that when you plant your seeds, put a label on it and put the date that you planted it, because time just flies by, right? We forget, we get busy, and you'll think, has it been a week? Has it been 2 weeks? I don't know. But if you wrote it down, you would know. So I always, you can use like a little popsicle stick or anything and just write down the name of what you planted and the date. And look down here. We're in this little purple shaded region. It says we can plant this March through October. Let's look at this seed packet on the back. Okay, it says clusters of pear-shaped yellow fruits. Yellow fruits. What could that be? Well, a dead giveaway for me is that it says indeterminate. Okay, that's going to be a tomato. Even though it says yellow, you might be thinking, what is this, a banana or yellow bell pepper? No, this is going to be a tomato. We'll talk about this later. What is indeterminate? What is determinate? What's the difference? Which one should you plant? There's a big difference between the two. It says depth. This one you only plant a 1/4 inch. Okay. And look at this. This one says start indoors, you guys. Okay. It says start them indoors because with tomatoes and peppers and things like that, it's great to get a jump start. Okay. If you plant them outside too early, it's going to be too cold for them. They're more of a warm and hot weather plant. So this one says start indoors. So follow the seed package instructions. Don't just do your own thing. And again, if you collected the seed and don't have this information, simple Google search, make sure your friend gives you the proper name of the seed that you collected, or you retain that information so that you know exactly what to do. And here are the instructions. And on this one right here, it says you can look right here, transplant. You can transplant. Okay. Here it just said you can sow your seeds directly in outdoor soil. Here it says transplant. Okay. So that means you've got a viable little plant in a pot. Okay. We're going to plant it outside between March and May, or between July and August. It's just so awesome. Look, these other zones only have this one time period, but we have two. Isn't that awesome? All right. Should I collect the seeds from plants or try another propagation method? Well, you guys probably know what this plant is right here. It's an iris. Most people know what this is. It is so easy to grow. If you've got a friend that has some, get a shovel, dig a clump out, break it apart, and now you've got your own plant. Just put it in the ground. These are so undemanding. They grow like a weed. If a plant is that easy to grow just by digging up a clump and putting the roots in the ground and it grows for you, why would you want to go through the hassle of starting from seed? Okay. Unless you're wanting to like maybe hybridize or, crossbreed something and make your own little plant. It just doesn't make sense. We want things to be easy. We want to save money, but seeds is not always the way to go. Sometimes dividing roots or cuttings and using rooting hormone and putting them in the ground and creating roots, that's going to be the best method for other plants, but not for everything. Okay, we're going to start seeing this in the stores. I love seeing this because it's always, spring's around the corner. It's time to get my vegetable garden going. So should you start by seeds with vegetables or by potted plants? It depends. It definitely depends. Just because it's for sale doesn't mean that it's the right choice, right? Because remember, producers of these plants, they want to make money. And maybe they're hoping that you're a novice and don't know what you're doing. And it's perfectly fine. I'm not judging you. If you want to go buy a plant that's in a pot, go for it. I do recommend that for novices, for people who just started, because sometimes planting by seed, you may be too busy. You may fail at it because you did something wrong. This is a good way to get started, maybe your first year of gardening, to, cut out some issues you may have and make it a little easier. So maybe next year you can start from seed. Look at the seed package instructions again. Does it state sow outdoors or start seed indoors? We talked about this earlier. I showed you some seed packages and it specifically told you either do this or do that. Some seed packages will tell you you can do either. It depends. Pay attention to the planting calendar. Nancy, we will email that to you guys later on. That planting calendar tells you from January through December when to plant what, when to plant your tomatoes, your potatoes, your onions. You know, we can't just go out and plant tomatoes right now outside. It doesn't make sense. We have to wait till it's a little warmer, right? So that calendar will guide you in the right direction so you know when to get those plants outside or when to start your seeds. Do you have time to start by seed? So, like I said, seed starting is happening, seed planting is starting now. So let's say you're like, I don't have time. My family's coming over. I'm not going to have time until March. Well, by that time, you know, we're going into the worm season and you're not going to have enough time to start by seed. You're going to need a plant by that time, or you're not going to get your fruits and veggies off of it in time before the freeze comes or before the really, really hot weather comes in. So you have to look at that calendar to find out, do I have time? Or should I just go out and buy a plant? But hopefully you plan ahead of time after watching this and you plant accordingly. Is buying a lettuce worth it? One lettuce, like a romaine lettuce, let's say, or iceberg lettuce. Is it worth buying one of those? I say no, because you can go to the store and get a head of lettuce for what, $3 or so. And once you cut that down, you know, to near the root, just leave the crown down in the ground. Yes, it can slowly, you know, grow new little leaves, but it's going to take forever to get another head of lettuce. So it's really not worth it. It's better just to get a packet of seeds, you know, $2, $3, and sprinkle those seeds out on your soil. You're going to get hundreds of lettuces. You can share them with your neighbors, family, whoever you want. What about buying a tomato plant? Is it worth it? Yes, it is worth getting a tomato plant because first of all, you don't have to deal with, you know, planting it from seed and maybe coming across some issues, which you shouldn't have after this video. But you're saving time, and that tomato is going to give you many, many tomatoes, right, off that plant, not just one tomato. Okay, so that's the difference. You really don't want to go out and buy a potted lettuce, but you do want to go out and get a potted tomato plant. So I hope you understand what I'm saying there. Seed planting suggestions and tips. I like to repurpose. I don't like to waste money on pots and things like that if I don't have to. You'd be surprised what all you have around your house. If you buy flowers and things, you know, keep those nursery pots. I keep a stash of them at home. You can also just use a big container like this and just sow them loosely. Keurig, I love those little containers. You can't keep them in there forever, but you can definitely start them in there. And they have a drainage hole already. Feel free to poke another one just for better drainage. But I use my Keurig containers a lot because I don't feel bad sharing with other people because it really didn't cost you much except for the little soil that goes in there, and you can share with other people. This container right here, a lot of you guys have seen these at the stores. This makes it easy too. You know, it gives a little greenhouse effect, but make sure you remove that clear plastic lid after you see the plants germinate, because you don't want to keep it too muggy and wet in there where fungal issues can arise. That's only meant to help the seeds get started and germinate. So once you start seeing little green dots and plants growing, take that thing off. We don't want to keep that on there. Down here, this picture, these are just some seeds that I've collected in the past, and you noticed I label all of them. Let me warn you though, I did not put them directly in these plastic containers. I like to use paper envelopes too. These have been completely dried. I mean, dry, dry, dry before I put them in here, and then I store them in my refrigerator. Not in the freezer, but in the refrigerator, just like in the little butter compartment. I just kind of stash them in there. And we'll talk about why I do that later on. But please make sure you dry them out, because if you put wet seeds, or if you think they're even think they're dry, they may not be. Let them dry out for several weeks. When they're bone dry, that's when you can store them in plastic. But otherwise, you can put them in some envelopes and be safer that way. always label. I'll even be as specific as rosemary from mom's house because there's so many different rosemary varieties out there. There's the culinary kind, there's the the ornamental kind, there's ornamental peppers, there's edible peppers. Some of my one of my neighbors had this really pretty globe amaranth, and it wasn't one that I had ever seen in the stores. It was a bigger one, and I had it too, but I wanted to make sure I had his stash of seeds correctly labeled so I can plant those. So always label. And of course, your planted seeds too, because look at this pot right here. You can't tell anything apart. They all look the same, right? A lot of times seeds look the same. And once you put them under soil, you definitely can't see them. So always put the date, remember, and the name of the plant. All right. When collecting seeds, a lot of people come across issues because they think, okay, if I save seeds from my tomato, it should grow exactly into these delicious tomatoes that I'm eating. Not always the case, okay? Thanks to the bees, which bees, we need the bees. They're wonderful. So always take care of bees. I don't like to use pesticides or anything like that because of our bees. We really need to protect these guys. But look what they do for us. It says pollen from the stamen sticks to the bee as it visits the flower to collect food. And then it goes over here and it's intermingling with another flower. Well, it is cross-pollinating for you. Well, when you end up, with your pretty flowers and such, and then the seeds come, you're thinking, okay, I want these white flowers next year, so I'm going to collect this. It may not happen. They may be yellow. Okay. If that plant creates a yellow flower, you may have yellow, you may have pink. So your seeds may not produce true to type, especially in hybrid plants. Hybrid plants are two different plants that have been crossed. Okay. A lot of times what we end up buying at the grocery store are hybridized, okay, tomatoes and such, because the producers want us to have nice looking tomatoes that taste good and look good so that they're more marketable. So a lot of them have been crossbred for that reason. So tomatoes, for instance, a lot of them are. So if you're planting, a lot of times I'll go out in my compost bin because I compost anything organic. I put it right back into my gardens. I'll get those freebie tomatoes. I know a lot of you guys have seen that sometimes just in your flower bed. You can get a little tomato seedling. Well, that seedling may not be like your tomato that you thought because it's been crossbred. So if you want your little cherry tomatoes that were so good and sweet, you may end up with kind of a mealy tasting medium-sized tomato. So it's okay. You can still grow those, not a big deal, but I choose not to just after so many years of gardening because I'm real picky. I just want this type of tomato or this type of pepper. But sometimes for fun, I'll just let one grow. But that's up to you. So your white dianthus flower seeds may turn out to have pink flowers, or your moss roses. They may not be the color that you collected selectively because bees. And there's the tomato information we talked about. So some people, they get real picky. This is a tomato plant. And tomato plants, the flowers, they actually are self-pollinating, okay? They have, inside each flower, they have male and female organs. So they don't really need a bee to hop on and to pollinate. But when it does happen, like I said, that tomato can be, mixed. It can be hybridized. So some people get real picky about it and want to keep any pollinators from doing that. So they put this little sac around it. It's kind of like a condom, if you will. It keeps the pollinators from being able to, to do their job. So this person wants to keep this plant true to this type. So they did this so that they can collect the seeds later on and start that plant again. So you can do that if you're very serious and a purist. For expired seeds, us master gardeners, we come across a lot of freebie seeds. I store so many seeds because inflation just went crazy. Plants are so expensive. So I like to save my seeds. I like to propagate with cuttings, anything to save money in my favorite hobby of gardening. So sometimes you'll look at a seed packet and it'll say packaged for 2020. And you're thinking, these are expired, let me toss them. Don't. Test them because they might still be viable, okay? Let's say that you go out and you know, till up your garden, you put in your compost, you're ready to go. You work so hard to create this garden. You don't test your seeds and you plant them. Maybe they're only 2 years old and you're thinking, I know for sure these will be okay. Well, depending on that seed, you know, some seeds expire quickly. Some have a better germination rate the faster you plant them. Some can last 10 years or more. So it just depends on the plant. But why go through all that trouble of planting all of that and taking your time to till, water, and go check out your plants every single day to have no action? Nothing comes about because they're expired. Okay. There's no energy left in that little seed. So, what you're going to do is get your seeds that you're not sure of, get a paper towel, get it wet. I like to do one seed at a time, but you can do this. It's on a plate or you can put it in a Ziploc baggie. If you do it on a plate, do it this way and then put the paper towel on top. So you're sandwiching the seeds in between two paper towels that are moist. And then you're going to put some saran wrap on top and kind of create like a little greenhouse and keep it in a slightly warm place, you know, not by a cold window. It doesn't have to have light or anything like that. Just in a regular room, kitchen, anything will be fine. But remember I told you about those dates? Very, very important. And you know, if you don't have the seed package, look on Google. How long does it take for my radishes to germinate? How long does it take pumpkins to germinate? Just look it up and they will give you roundabout information on that. So most seeds, like I said, about 10 to 14 days, but some seeds can pop up in 3 days. So write down on your Ziploc bag or your saran wrap that's covering these what the plant is. I mean, beans are pretty easy to figure out, but some other ones are not. Write down what it is and the day that you did your test so that you know when the expiration time is. Because again, we don't know if it's been a week or 2 weeks unless we note that. Let's look at this example right here. So this is a test that was done with about 12 seeds. And what's the germination rate on this? 100%. These don't look very promising, but look, they're just late bloomers, if you will. They did germinate. They're sprouting out, okay? So this is 100% success rate. You are ready to plant these. But here on the right, okay, not as great. But you know what? Let's just make math easy. We don't have to count each one. Let's just say this is a 50% germination rate, okay? Again, you need to know how long it takes for that seed to germinate. If it says 10 to 14 days and it's on day 15 and it looks like this, you know this is it. I would not plant anything that doesn't at least have 50% success rate because you're wasting your time. If you have at least a 50% rate and you're supposed to plant 2 per hole, go ahead and plant 4 or 5 because you know your seeds are not 100% viable. Only half of them are. So do your math and plant accordingly. Don't just toss them out. If you want those seeds, you can still use them. But I do suggest you do this. So let's say that you need to start your seeds in 2 weeks from now. Go ahead and do that tonight when we're done. Go ahead and test them, you know, not all of them. Just go ahead and test a handful or whatever you can sacrifice. And by the way, you can still plant these guys too. You don't have to throw these away. You can gingerly put them in the soil and let them continue to grow. All right, sometimes we need to scarify, okay? Scarification is needed. That's gonna be for seeds that are really hard the plants can't pop out of the shell. They have a really thick seed coating. It's physically damaging the seed's shell. It can be a little bit dangerous, so be careful. You can use a knife. We'll talk about some other methods. It increases the germination rate. So if you know, year after year, you can't get your plants to grow, it might be that that seed just cannot germinate. Just help it out. It's kind of a way to kind of cheat nature a little bit and help you out with better germination rates. So yeah, it helps the seed break through its protective coating. Some examples, guys, there are so many, but this is a very short class tonight. Here are some examples: morning glory, mountain laurel, water lotus. I had great success doing this with water lotus seed pods, blue bonnets. Um, some techniques. What is scarifying exactly? Well, it's just rubbing the seed on sandpaper, kind of destroying that outer shell, creating a little hole so that it can germinate. Use a knife to nick seeds. Rub the seed on a metal file. I do this a lot. I soak seeds in warm water. As a matter of fact, I normally do that for most of my seeds to give it a jump start because they've been in that packet for a long time. So I want to cheat the system a little bit, and I put them in a little bit of warm water overnight, and then I'll plant them the next day. You can nick the edges with nail clippers. Chemical scarification with acid. I've used lemon juice and orange juice in the past. Those worked also. Here's an example of a seed packet. Morning glory. These are so easy. They're kind of like a weedy vine that just kind of grows. It's an annual here, but it's a fun plant to experiment with. This is the most popular morning glory, it says. All right, days to germination, 10 days. So if you don't see it pop out of the ground in 10 days, something might be wrong, okay? But look at this. I highlighted nick seeds and soak overnight in water, okay? Even the producer of these seeds are telling you, hey, here's a little trick. Let's do that. So definitely follow those instructions. If you collected the seed, now you know, because you can do a little Google search to find out how to prepare those seeds. Also, let's look at this. I know this is not a morning glory class, but it says does not transplant well. That is true for morning glories. They don't like to be started indoors. They want to be direct sown. I have started them indoors and it worked, but I just like to experiment with things. But as a general rule, they want to be outside, and also they don't like cold weather. So it's going to be a little bit later, March through June. I would even say even April is probably a little safer because we can still get that late freeze here. They just do not like the cold weather. So, you might be wondering, do I start from seed or do I direct sow? Do your research, please, and you'll save a lot of headache, tears. Cold stratification. Do you guys know that peach trees, they need a chill period? They need a certain amount of chill hours. It depends on which variety and such, how many hours they need, but it can be hundreds to 1,000 hours that they need. If they don't get that chill period, they could flower at the wrong time. They won't produce as much fruit. They may not fruit at all. So it's really important that we have a proper um, winter, if you will. But that also pertains to seeds. A lot of seeds need that cycle of winter to say, hey, it's time to wake up. Spring is here. But if you keep your stored seeds in your closet inside the house, that's, the temperature's monitored, it's always cozy and warm. That seed does not know when to wake up. That is why I dry my seeds and I store them in the refrigerator. It hasn't hurt any seeds to date. And I've propagated so many different types, vegetables, flowers, trees. They've all done very well, sticking them in the refrigerator. You may not want to do that with true tropical plants, but anything that can grow here will be okay. It simulates the natural colder parts of the year and breaks the seed's dormancy. So, that may be 1 to 3 months, depending on your seed. I've even stored them in there for a year. So just do your research, find out if your plant is okay with that. Here are some examples: butterfly bush, blackberry lily, hardy hibiscus, catmint, evening primrose. Now, some of these you're thinking, hey, why would I even start those by seed? The hibiscus is so easy to start by cuttings. The catmint, you can just divide the root ball. And that's true. But I'm just telling you about their seed if you wanted to experiment and have some fun with the seeds. But so remember, we need to think, Is it worth starting by seed, or should I just ask a friend for a root division or a cutting? But in this case, you need to realize some seeds need to have that cold stratification or they will not germinate because they're still sleeping. They don't know. Oh, black-eyed Susan too. All right. I wrote in here, please note that commercially packaged seeds will be ready to plant. Okay, so don't worry about those. The producer has already done that, so they're ready to plant. Damping off disease and symptoms. This is where people start to lose hope. They plant their seeds and, they're like, what is that white fuzzy stuff? Why was it healthy one day and the next day I came out and they look like this plant right here? It looks like somebody played a cruel joke on you and smashed the stem of your plant. Okay. Or this happened. You're like, wait a minute. I know I watered it yesterday. I know everything's fine. Well, that's caused by fungi and you don't always see it. You don't always get the telltale signs. It can be microscopic. Overwatering can cause it. So make sure that when we water, we don't want your pot sitting in water. Okay. Remember, anaerobic, they can get stinky, bacteria. We don't want that. So make sure you water and then let your pot maybe sit in the sink to drain completely before you put it back in its saucer. Like I mentioned, you're going to see these signs like the pinched or broken stems. It's really disheartening after all that work you put into it and the monitoring and checking. And then you see that happened to me a long time ago. And thankfully it hasn't happened again because I, follow the rules. So let's go through all of that. How to help prevent damping off disease. Whether it's volunteering at the Fort Worth Botanic Garden or working in greenhouses, I've never seen any plant producer or plant grower skip this step. They always sanitize their pots, okay? Act like you're about to do surgery. Just put them in some disinfectant. It can be Clorox, it can be Lysol, any brand of disinfectant, okay? Clean and sanitize the pots. Don't use a dirty one because right there, you're already potentially going to have some issues. You can use the seed starting mix. Again, you don't have to, but you can. Water from the bottom if you want to avoid wetting the leaves. A lot of plants like tomatoes and roses, they don't like their leaves wet. They can get fungal issues that way. So either avoid watering directly on top and just get into the soil or water from the bottom where they can soak up the water, but make sure that it's enough where the water can penetrate and siphon the water all the way up to the top. Good drainage is a must. Good air circulation. You can even maybe turn on a fan to get the air circulating. But remember I told you to take those plastic lids off? That's another reason. A lot of people think they need to continue to let their plants grow in there until they reach the top. No. That's only there to help them germinate. And then hats off. Okay, this is not research backed or anything like this. It's just an old trick. You can also sprinkle cinnamon on top of the soil after you plant to help discourage fungal growth. I do it. It's never hurt anything. Like I said, I haven't had the issue again. A lot of old timers like to use this trick. I know that a lot of nurseries use this trick. So go for it. All right. This is the hardest part for me, guys, because after you put your love and time into your plants, the last thing you want to do is start killing some of them off, right? But you have to, because if you don't, they all suffer. It's known as culling. You have to do it. It's necessary to limit competition for sunlight, water, to promote better root growth, because if it's too crowded, they're just fighting with each other. So unfortunately, you kind of have to get the struggling ones or the smaller ones or the ones that are not growing super healthy. You have to pull those. This picture up here, you can do that, but I don't like to use my fingers to pull because what happens underneath the soil line? You're potentially damaging the healthy one next to it because it's kind of like matted up hair, okay? You're pulling one and it's going to pull on the other one too. So I just, they're so small. Once you clip the tops, they cannot grow again. You're basically murdering them at that point. So I just like to use little scissors and I go in and I just cut the little stems of the ones that I don't want. So in this situation here, see this big guy? You may want to cut this one next to it. You know, the package instructions or a search online will tell you how much to thin them out. But you definitely don't want them continuing to grow like this because it'll stunt the growth. You won't have healthy, um, you know, well-producing plants. You have to give the healthy ones a better chance. Fork or tool, you can also use that, but like I said, scissors, I like the best. Just makes it real easy. All right, let's look at these seed packages again. All right, this one is pretty easy. It says pumpkins right here, so we know what it is. And it says thin, 2 to 3 per group. Okay, so you've got to do it. This one, thin plants, 1 to 2 per hill. Okay. After the true leaves develop, okay, whether it's in your pot or outdoors, see the difference here? These are the initial baby seed leaves, like baby teeth, like our baby teeth. And then here's an adult tooth that came out. This is a true leaf, okay? Once you see that, you can use a balanced fertilizer at half strength weekly. But don't do that for tomatoes. You know, if you fertilize tomatoes too early, all the energy goes into the green of the plant and you end up getting no tomatoes because you end up getting a tomato tree. So be careful with tomatoes. That's a different topic. Gently and lightly brush the tops of your plants to strengthen them. Okay, it's kind of like the rule about trees. When you plant a tree, you don't want to stake it. Okay, you can stake it if it's leaning. Okay, there's a reason to stake it, or if you live in a real windy area, sometimes you might need that. But the general rule is only to stake your tree for 1 year. And the reason is when you stake your tree, it weakens it over time because it doesn't have that movement, that back and forth with wind or whatnot. It you know, think about if your arm's in a cast, you know, for months and months, you start losing mobility, you get atrophy. Okay. You've got to keep moving those muscles and exercising. Same thing with your plants. So don't, you know, don't put your dirty hands on it. Again, we're trying to keep a sterile environment. Wash your hands or maybe even put on some gloves and just gently brush the tops of your plants to replicate, you know, wind coming through. That way you're going to strengthen the stems of your plants and give it a better chance once you do put them outside. Continue to water correctly and provide your good air circulation and light. Okay, you may need to bump up if needed. These right here, they're just too small. I would not recommend putting these little bitty 1 inch wide plants directly outside. If you protect them from the wind and maybe give them a, you know, little bit of coverage from the sun just to help them get started, that might be okay. But again, that's extra work for you. So you may want to just bump them up and give them a better root system to give them a better chance once they get outside. That's called bumping up. And guys, you don't want to put a little plant like this into like a gallon container. Okay, it needs to be the next size up because when you water that one little plant that's in your gallon container, you have to water it completely, right? Well, that little bitty root system cannot uptake all of that excess water. And then you end up again with that anaerobic, fungal, bacterial situation with too much soggy water stuck in the soil. So move it up to the next size only. That's for any plant, house plants, or potted trees, you know, anything, vegetables, next size up only. So are your plants ready to be planted after all that? No, you have to harden them off. I even do this to plants that I buy at the store, whether it's, you know, cucumber, pumpkin, anything. Let's say I didn't have time to start by seed. So, you know, and I'm always tempted as a gardener. Oh, that looks good. Let me go buy that. When I bring it home, you know, they've been shaded for our sake, the consumer's sake. A lot of them are sometimes under a shade cloth and such so that we can go out there and shop. Well, the plants are now too weak to withstand our hot temperatures, you know, if it's summer or something like that. So make sure you harden them off, gradually place them outside. The first day, put them out, you know, maybe just for 30 minutes, bring them back in. The next day, a little longer, and just gently increase that time. Don't shock them by taking them outside just out of nowhere. It's kind of like us, you know, you'll end up getting a sunburn. And a lot of times They're not even strong enough to withstand the wind because they've just been sitting under protective cover and shelter and a roof. So do this for about a week before you actually plant. But the definition is the process of acclimating plants and seedlings to the outside environment before planting them outside. A lot of people go through all that work of starting seeds and then end up failing, with this. If you start seeds of cucumbers, squash, I call those crunchy or crispy plants because they snap easily, unlike a tomato or pepper that have a little more like a fibrous stem. The cucumbers and squash, if you kind of bend their stem, a lot of times those snap, kind of like a cucumber would snap. And so those are more susceptible to breakage in high winds. So make sure you acclimate and harden them off first. All right, so now you're ready to plant, but make sure you amend your garden soil before you start planting. I never ever plant anything without adding a little bit of compost. Okay, you don't have to. I mean, it's great if you can move all the mulch away and put 2 to 3 inches of compost and amend the soil and till it in. That'd be great. But sometimes we're out of time, or that might be too expensive for a lot of people. But at least dig your hole, amend it with some compost, then put your plant in it. Okay, that's the least you can do. Now, we don't want to do that to trees. For trees and shrubs, native soil only, okay, because we don't want the roots girdling that plant and growing in a circle, because that's where all the good, yummy soil is. We want trees and shrub roots to grow out. So for trees and shrubs, I'll repeat, do not amend the soil, only use your native soil. When I say amend your soil, that I'm talking about flowers, your annuals, your perennials, and your vegetable plants. That's what we're going to amend. Now, if you have trees and shrubs, that's another topic, but you can top dress those if you want, but never ever put that yummy good compost down into the hole, because we don't want those roots to be encouraged to stay right there. We want them to branch out and be healthy, to have a good anchoring system. Keep an eye on your babies. Our Texas heat, it can scorch them. As a matter of fact, my veggie garden, I have an evergreen shrub on the west side of it. It's a south-facing location so that it gets, veggie gardens most of them want full sun. But here in North Texas, it's a little different. Plants appreciate a little bit of that western protection, western sun protection. So a lot of people end up using shade cloths here. You don't have to, but you'll see the difference in your plants, and they'll thank you if you protect them a little bit. But this situation here, you don't want to keep the lid on because it can get too hot in there, but this protects them from wind and things like that. And even, some insects. This again is wind protection and some sun protection. You can get as creative as you want. All right, tomatoes are very, very popular. So I always like to include this. We're going to talk about indeterminate versus determinate tomatoes. 99% of the time, you will see on the seed packet or on the plant itself, whether it's at a big box store, any place you buy your plants, you're going to see that that tomato has this description, either indeterminate or determinate. Let's look at this for a minute. Indeterminate tomatoes are going to be like vining tomatoes. Think about a grapevine, okay? They normally need to be trimmed, okay? So many different YouTube videos, you guys, on how to get the most fruit out of your plant by eliminating some, like stems that aren't producing for you, yet you don't want to cut off too much because those produce food for the plant. So make sure you watch some of those good videos on how to prune tomato plants on the indeterminate plants. But look at this, indeterminate plants, they produce throughout the season, okay? A little bit here and there. So usually you're not going to get an overabundance at one time. Whereas the determinate tomatoes are usually smaller. They're called bush tomatoes. And it's kind of a one and done. You get most of your tomatoes in one whack in this short amount of time. Not to say that you're not going to get a couple more stragglers. That could still happen. But generally with determinate tomatoes, you're going to see the health of them kind of decline after that big burst of energy they gave you to produce all those tomatoes. So depending on what you want, let's say you want to make salsa, marinara, you may, want to get these bush tomatoes because you're going to get a bunch at one time, but be prepared to use them because you're going to get a bunch. Whereas these vine tomatoes, you're going to get some here and there, you can share, but you're going to get tomatoes throughout the whole growing season. Okay. So depending on what you want, if you're an apartment dweller, you definitely want to go with determinate or a bush tomato. They're pot friendly. And look at this, you don't have to prune them. You can. I always prune off the lower leaves just to keep water from splashing on them. And they're generally not like the healthiest leaves on the bottom. That's up to you, but I do groom my tomato plants. But if you want a smaller tomato, definitely go with determinate. So let's look at some labels and see what that looks like. This beefsteak tomato, okay? Does it say anywhere on here? Can you see where it says indeterminate or determinate? Bingo, right there at the beginning, indeterminate. So we know this is a vining big tomato. It's going to need a big tomato plant. It's going to need a stake or a fence or something to crawl on, like a vine. Okay, remember that's indeterminate. And you're going to get tomatoes throughout the growing season. Let's look at another one. Clusters of pear-shaped yellow fruits with mild, delicious flavor, indeterminate. Again, a vining tomato. And look, it even says start indoors. We know that about tomatoes, right? All right, let's look at another one. This tomato bush Roma Supremo. Is it determinate or indeterminate? Right here, determinate. This is going to be a smaller sized tomato, okay? And look right here, here's another, even if they didn't tell us determinate, look at the keywords for canning, sauces, okay? You're gonna get a bunch at once, be ready. Let's look at this one, tomato. It tells you determinate. Look, it says compact determinate plants. We know that now, right? They're smaller. And it says container friendly because they're smaller. But I will say, even these container friendly, smaller bush tomatoes, they still need like a cage or something because they can still grow to pretty good size and they might sag, especially if they start fruiting too much, which hopefully you'll have that problem. Here is the calendar I was telling you about. A lot of these are circulating through all the different counties and AgriLife Extension, all the different master gardening counties that we have. We're in Tarrant County and we're in Zone 8. So I like to use the Collin County calendar. I think we're going to get one of these soon, but they are in our zone, so it's safe to use. Make sure you don't use, the one for, Xerox County. I'm just making stuff up because that might be in zone 9. Okay, not the same climate, not the same time frame of gardening as us. So this is crucial to follow this gardening calendar. Also, if you don't want to use this one, I told you about almanac.com. That'll give you specific information for your zip code. But I like this one because at a glance, it tells me, okay, January, what can I do? What can I be busy with? Well, hey, even in January, Asian greens, okay? Look at the stuff you can still plant. Now look right here in June. It's kind of a ghost town. Not a lot going on, but you can still plant your warm greens, okay? There are some things you can still plant, but it's not as fun and exciting as the spring and fall season. But look at the fall veggie gardening season. Guys, it's like a mirror image practically of spring. That's what's so great about living here in North Texas. We have 2 vegetable gardening seasons. How great is that? Which varieties of vegetables should you buy? I'm telling you, every time I get, as a gardener, we get too excited in the spring and in the fall, and we want to go try new varieties. Normally I'm disappointed when I go just randomly selecting something just because the plant looks healthy in its little pot. I'm thinking, let me try this one out. It looks good. I've never been as successful as when picking these varieties off the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension website. It's absolutely free. Look right here. It says recommended vegetable varieties for region B. That's us, North and Central Texas. All you have to do is Google this keyword, vegetable variety selector. And then you'll see our website pop up, Texas A&M AgriLife Extension, vegetables. If I gave you the actual website, it would be really long and you couldn't remember it. So just remember this, vegetable variety selector. It comes right up. Click on it. You can print all of the vegetables at once and keep it in your glove compartment in your car in case you stop into a nursery someday unexpectedly, or just print the cucumber list, or just print the mustard list, tomato list, whatever you're interested in. But I like to just print out the whole thing. It is pages and pages long, but just in case you want to buy a lettuce that you hadn't planned on. But do stick to these varieties because these have been tested and researched, and these grow best here in our soil, in our climate, our weather. Okay, so try to stick to these for the best success. And of course, this is only one page of many, many, many. All right, that concludes our class here. If you guys have any questions, please ask. If you forget to ask tonight, and remember tomorrow or the next day, you can always give us a call at 884-1944. And you can also email us at taranmg@ag.tamu.edu, and a master gardener will get back to you. Do you guys have any questions? Thank you so much for joining us tonight, by the way.
You do have a couple of questions coming in through the webinar chat line.
Okay.
Yeah. One of the latest one that I saw here is a regular potting mix okay to start seeds?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes. That's normally my go-to. To be honest with you, I just kind of buy it in bulk when it's cheap. Just make sure your hands and your pots and everything are clean, just to give you a good advantage to and a good jump start to not having to deal with any other fungal or bacterial issues. But yeah, absolutely. Now I mean, not that you can't, but I wouldn't go out and dig up some native soil and put it into pots because you might be coming across some issues there. Not to say that it won't work. I've done it in the past. Probably shouldn't admit that, but yes, you definitely can use any potting soil.
Okay. The other question on here is when you soak seeds overnight, how long might that be?
Well, definitely check what seeds you have because some seeds will actually, they don't like to be underwater too long. So make sure you check, but generally like 99% of seeds, just overnight. I'll normally do it the evening before and then the next morning plant them.
Okay.
It definitely does help with germination though, because it helps the seed coating swell up and it helps it crack through its shell, and better germination rate, faster germination rate.
And then the last question I see in here, I think, is, hi, thank you so much, Loretta. This is my first time wanting to plant this year. She moved from New Mexico. What 4 plants should I start for sure?
For vegetable gardening?
Yes.
Easy ones. I'd say radishes because you get such a quick turnaround from them. Within 30 days, you'll have radishes. Lettuce is another fun one. You know what? Who doesn't love tomatoes? I'd also do tomatoes. If you don't want to start off with seeds, just go buy a couple of plants, especially if you're a newbie, because I don't want you to, I'm not saying you're going to have problems, but the first year, maybe start off that way, but definitely lettuce and radishes start by seed. And I'd go out and buy a tomato and your favorite pepper. That's what I would do.
Okay. And the
And
last one, I
herbs.
think,
Herbs are
maybe,
so easy.
yeah. How do you know how long to cold stratify?
You do need to look online for information on that. Usually 1 to 3 months. Like I said, I've kind of broken the rule and left my seeds in the refrigerator sometimes for years because I don't have time to plant them when I planned on it that following spring. And they were completely fine. Of course, I do the viability test too before so I don't waste my time. But It's been fine, longer than that, but you do have a minimum period of chill that's required for many seeds. So make sure you look that up. I'm sorry, I don't have everything memorized as far as time. So, but just a quick search, and make sure you go to a reputable site. Um, you know, if you see a website that says kittenscrochetandgardening.com, it's probably not going to be a reputable site. It's just going to be somebody's opinion. But anything ending in an eat.edu, a college, Texas AgriLife's website, almanac.com, those are going to be more reputable websites.
Okay. Another one is an unusual, I don't think we addressed, is if you're using grow bags, should you use those in a machine to sanitize?
The grow bags I've used before. Honestly, I just try the best I can. A lot of times, even if you just leave those grow bags out in the sunlight, the UV rays can help sanitize it for you. So you don't have to actually scrape every little piece of, soil out of it. So just use your best judgment. Maybe a good rinse, let it sit out in the sun, and prepare you for the next gardening season.
You have time for a couple more questions?
I do.
I need to remind everybody that the evaluation link, if you want to go ahead and complete that, is in the chat. You can go ahead and complete it now, and you will also receive an evaluation link from Nancy. And we really appreciate it if you'll complete those, because we appreciate your feedback, and let us know other things that you would like to learn about. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and the other thing is Nancy put in there about the forms.
That's what I'm talking about.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. And this participant wants to know, how do you water from the bottom when they are in those little plastic seed starting containers?
Yeah, great question. It takes a lot longer for that soil to actually wick up that soil. So you do have to be careful. A lot of times when I have used the water on the bottom method, I didn't put enough in there. And so I go and check it about an hour or two later, and I see that the tops of the soil are still dry. You need to make sure that it's wicking all the way up, that the soil is completely saturated. But yet on the flip side, you don't want it to be sitting in that saucer of water for more than 2 hours. Definitely get it out. But that's what it is. It's basically a wicking method where the water, you have to have a saucer underneath, but it'll eventually wick up the moisture. If it's a shallow pot, it's doable. But if it's a deeper pot with a plant, like let's say a bigger plant, then sometimes that moisture can't always reach the top. So make sure you're aware of that. The best way is just to gently water, just the soil, trying to avoid the leaves if you can. Sometimes you can't, but just little tips to kind of avoid any issues from arising.
Okay, and the last question I can see is, can we start tomato seeds outside now if we provide protection?
I wouldn't. We can still have a huge freeze come through. I wouldn't. You can if you want to, but even like a shade cloth or something like that is not going to be enough. You would have to have some type of heating element underneath your cover to really keep that plant healthy. Tomato plants especially, they're kind of like morning glories. They don't want, if you plant them too early, it can actually affect them for the entire growing season. It can actually stunt them and mess up the plant structure. So you don't want to start too early with tomatoes.